Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests, we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges, and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you subscribe so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted to be joined today by Natasha Robinson, local product expert at SAP UK and Ireland, and Adam Frank, SAP HR Functional Lead at Deutag. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing payroll and especially patching, the do's and don'ts and top tips from both of our guests. So before we get into that thrilling topic, I just thought I'd ask a quick question of you both. Just having some cheese on toast, my breakfast this morning, and got me to thinking, what's your favourite cheese? So I'd like to start with you, Natasha, if I may.
Oh, well, if it's a sandwich, it has to be mature cheddar or it's a baked camembert.
Oh, with breadsticks
Oh,
or...
yes. All to myself, yes.
Oh, no sharing?
No.
Oh. Adam?
Actually, I do know an answer to that one. It's easier than the last one you were asking. There's an oak smoked cheddar. That's a very nice. It's slightly softer, but it's an oak smoked cheddar, and it's absolutely wonderful. So much so that last time I went in, I didn't even buy one of those small packets. I just went to the deli counter and bought like a quarter of a round. It was very nice.
Oh, lovely. Oh, thank you. I'll have to have a look for that one. And okay, I suppose when we have camembert, we have to each get our own, Natasha. No sharing on that
Oh,
one.
yes.
Oh, thank you very much there. And, moving on to our topic now, payroll, an area where I always say to people, there's always something happening in payroll. It's certainly our liveliest and most active forum on our collaboration platform because there's always questions from members being asked, being answered, discussion topics, and, regulations constantly evolve and many organizations rely on SAP for payroll. So just if I could start with you, Natasha, and just ask you, what is best practice when it comes to patching and making sure the systems are up to date?
So SAP will always recommend you stay as up to date as possible because those patches aren't just about legal changes. There's what we describe as bug fixes. So by regularly taking those, you're clearing those problems from your system probably before you even encounter them. But as I'm sure Adam will come on to, that's not always possible depending how complex you are. So if you can do it quarterly or maybe even, twice a year at the very least. That's kind of where we'd want you to be as up to date as you can possibly be, considering your landscape of having multiple countries, multiple modules, which all kind of make it more complicated to stay up to date.
And I suppose from your perspective, local product expert, UK and Ireland, there are different things happening on both of those locations.
Absolutely, and having different tax years as well means that we're slightly offset from each other. So my colleague Bianca is busier earlier because it's January is the start of the new tax year, where Elaine and I should be ramping up with busyness now, ready to hit that April tax year. So, it kind of means we've got that offset busyness within the team.
Yeah, very, very lively communities working in both of those areas. So, and Adam, can you share from a user perspective on how you approach keeping your systems up to date and perhaps some of the challenges you face?
Yeah, I first off, I would agree with Natasha about the complexity and the frequency about updating. In case Deutag, we're a global company, so we've got the different financial years as well. But we do try to keep, as a bare minimum, twice a year updates, and we gear that towards the sync packs because the sync packs are kind of like the start all of what you have the country legal changes. So we do try to do it as a minimum of twice a year. On top of that, what we have, the complexity that comes in with us, as Natasha says, is the financial years. So we have, just to take 3 examples, we have Germany, Canada, and the UK. So we have country legal changes, which are specific changes just for that particular country module, Germany, Canada. You look in the SAP system, you can see all of those. But we're at a rush towards the end of the year where the second sync pack comes in, usually about November, 10th of November, it's coming out this year, where once that's applied, we have to then quickly apply the German and Canada CLCs for January payroll. So that's, we need to keep that up to date because of course that includes the legal changes as well as bug fixes. A couple of months after that, we're into the UK stuff for March, April. So there's all that complexity. And one of the other major issues we have is just trying to get business commitment. It's not that they're not wanting to commit, it's simply the fact that everybody's got their day job, but the changes do have to be tested. I've been in other companies where they just put them in and didn't test them. I think that's a bit risky, personally. Even if it's not just legal changes, if it's just bug fixes, like as Natasha says, you may not come across it. It always makes, I think it's always beneficial to test to make sure it's not have a negative impact. So yeah, twice a year minimum, I would definitely agree with.
Thank you. And of course we've had a lot of disruption in the last few years, you know, from COVID to Brexit and all of the challenges that throws up. What have been some of the major challenges that need to have been addressed over the past couple of years?
From a user point of view, in terms of SAP processing, honestly, I'm not sure COVID hit us too much and Brexit hit us very much. I know that SAP, Natasha, you guys helpfully released a solution for the sickness calculations around COVID and such like. Maybe you'll mention that a little bit. But we actually didn't implement that so much as we had our own workaround, if you like to call it, with an additional payment or something, just because of the way we did it in our company. The other thing, I think the main issue that we've had recently in terms of payroll is potentially in other companies would have been the conflict out in Ukraine. Anybody that has Russian employees and people in Russia, that may have caused an issue with making sure you have to pay, can you pay, should you pay, with all the sanctions and everything in place. That's kind of what I would say from my experience.
Yeah, and from an SAP perspective, Natasha, I'm sure there was a whole raft of changes and I'll say tweaks, but I think that's undermining it to the systems that you needed to roll out.
So I agree with Adam from an HCM perspective. Brexit didn't really impact us very much, but I know my colleague in finance who does the equivalent as me, it was mad. There was just so much import-export taxes. There was a huge amount of work that had to be done. And it wasn't just the UK, but it was all the countries you export out to and back from. So it was a big education piece, making customers understand it's not just happening to the UK, you need to change as well. But certainly COVID, the furlough report, the speed that was announced, the speed that we had to deliver with very little information, which then evolved over time. That did give us some issues, and the fact that they then actually kept changing what the rules of furlough as we started to come out of the lockdown into more kind of normal living. So that was a challenge, but it was a brand new report, so it sat kind of independently, picking up on Adam's tweaks. The changes in the SSP waiting days meant we had to go and tinker with existing processing that's been there for 25, 30 years. That was much more of a challenge because we needed to be able to go back and change it at some point in the future when waiting days came back in. And just to add a little bit more excitement to that, when they've reintroduced waiting days, they've done it for sort of Great Britain and Scotland, but Northern Ireland are still having a special rule. So we've had to kind of make that distinction between different countries now, which in the past we've never had to do. We've just had United Kingdom as a whole. So that kind of stuff has caused us some real headaches and lots of extra testing as well.
I can only imagine. And so, now so that's looking at the past and the challenges and the way we've got over them. If we kind of cast our minds forward now, perhaps, and what potential changes are coming up that people should be aware of that might affect them with the systems. And if I can start with you on that one, Natasha.
Yes, and I think things are very speculative at the moment. We have a brand new Prime Minister. Having listened to a lot of the news and the debates, there was a lot of things that Liz Truss was saying. It cast doubt over the national insurance rises that we had this financial year. Do we have health and social care levy? And so we're waiting for announcements around that. But unfortunately, due to the very sad death of the Queen, Parliament has now been suspended, and so we're not going to get any clarity around those changes. So again, we're still speculating and unable to really plan until some sort of clear communication comes from the government.
Thanks. And Adam, what are you looking towards or planning for, perhaps?
Yeah, no, I was ticking off the things I'd mentioned down here as well. The social care levy as well is definitely something we are looking at to see what's going to happen there. From our perspective, not just the UK side of things, we have a quite a complex implementation for Germany at the moment going ahead. It's an energy price lump sum payment specifically for all German employees, and that has to be in for September payroll. So that's something that we're doing now. The other one, I guess, I would mention just briefly, you mentioned about unfortunate death of the Queen there. There is the announcement that Monday is a bank holiday, so to keep the record straight, everyone's going to have to update their holiday calendars in the system to make sure that's a bank holiday, so people don't have to take it as a holiday. Sort of, I guess you might say that's more of a mundane point, but things like that is what we've got to put into the system as well. So
it is indeed, and obviously these things are often given more notice, but because of obviously the extenuating circumstances, and it's something that's thrown on everybody to deal with quickly at this sad time. But obviously on the payroll, it's so vastly important, and I've said this before, and I think if we look at SAP, SAP's helping businesses run better, to use the SAP phrase. But when we think about that and we think, yes, it's very important, manufacturing, supply chain, etc., there's nothing more important than paying your employees at the end of the day. And if things go wrong in the payroll side, that is a big problem, because we need to pay our employees. And that data is also very sensitive for organisations. And I know from talking to different members over time, many are thinking, well, looking at the future, looking at cloud versus on-premise, and the way the world's going in that cloud space. But is there a feeling that I'm not really sure about moving my data to the cloud? I feel it's safer keeping it on-premise, etc. So from that perspective, what are the differences between managing payroll systems on-premise versus the cloud? And Natasha, if you'd like to begin on that one.
So I can speak to that from an SAP's perspective. The Employee Central Payroll, which is our cloud payroll, it uses the same robust engine as our on-premise customers. So that part of it kind of remains the same. But the benefit of being with the cloud is the provider is responsible for making sure that system is up and running, it's performing quickly. They take some of the responsibility for applying the patches. There's still customer work that has to be done because they're your business scenarios, your test scripts, but the technical side of actually applying those patches and keeping things up to date becomes the responsibility of the provider. So that would typically be SAP when we're talking about an ECP implementation. Mm-hmm. So that kind of takes some of the headache away from the maintenance of that system.
Yeah, and I know it's a completely different discussion topic. So I had the chat with a group of guests around the cybersecurity piece, some months back. And, often when you look at the security that's put into cloud solutions, there's possibly an argument there to say it's even more secure than an on-premise environment anyway. But from your perspective, Adam, does that kind of security element, on-prem versus cloud, come into any discussions at KCA Deutag?
Absolutely, Craig. I think you've been looking at the notes I've been making here. Everybody can see my notes because that's one of the highlight points that I mentioned was security. It's got to be one of the primary points of consideration. And it's interesting that you mentioned it's probably more secure online, because I actually thought the same thing myself. Some years ago, probably the main blocker would be, no, it's our data online, everybody can get to it. But arguably, the companies providing this service probably are using that as their primary focus because they know people are worried about that. And as you say, it's potentially more secure than being on-prem, because the people running an online service will be aware of all kinds of different types of breach that maybe an on-premise company who's running it themselves are not aware of. They've only got tunnel vision for what they've encountered, potentially. So yeah, security definitely does come into it. I think the other one, as far as we're concerned, why we are still on-premise primarily, is one of cost. It always comes up, doesn't it? How much is it going to cost?
Mm-hmm.
How is it going to cost? Is it going to be monthly, a one-off flat fee? But that's got to be weighed up with ease of use, continual updates, processing side of simplicity for the user, pushing out responsibility from a overworked, underappreciated admin team in company to the employee to be able to do stuff themselves and empowering them. And to Natasha's point, from my perspective, from a technical side, Natasha's point to the fact that we don't have to do the updates anymore and maintenance, that's fantastic. That really is a win from our side. So yeah, as far as we're concerned from a customer and generally customers, I would still see a continued move online. Personally, I think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think picking up on the question earlier about the impact of COVID and all that sort of stuff, I think those customers that are already in the cloud and had easy access to those systems from wherever they were actually found that transition a lot easier than maybe traditional companies that only permitted access to their on-premise systems within the office environment. So that's another consideration as well.
So that's interesting. So are we talking there as well from a perhaps remote working perspective too, that easier access?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Hi, we're the UK and Ireland SAP user group. Did you know we're a fiercely independent not-for-profit? Did you know we're a vibrant community of over 6,500 SAP users? And did you know we help each other by sharing resources, championing education, and influencing SAP's future development? Well, you do now. If you'd like to get the most from your SAP investments and be in the know, visit our website, sapusers.org/pod. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And from that then, so we were talking about patching and obviously the discussions around minimum twice a year, make sure we're up to date, etc. And then from the cloud perspective, you mentioned there, Natasha, that obviously from anybody with SAP in the cloud environment, SAP will do the patching. So does that make it easier, or I just misjudged what you said?
Yes, so to clarify, SAP will do the patching, but there's very much a conversation that takes place before that happens. It has to be coordinated because we still have the same situation in the cloud. As Adam mentioned, multiple countries, multiple modules potentially, depending on what cloud offering they've got. So there always has to be that conversation, that coordination between the team who are technically going to apply the patch and the customer who then needs to consume that patch and test that patch. So it's not an automatic.
Okay. Put you on the spot now then. Is it easier to do it in the cloud or on premise for the customer?
I think that comes down to the customer and their capability in-house. If it's a customer who is very new to SAP, they don't have the traditional centre of excellences, they don't have a basis team, then the cloud is definitely going to be much more attractive to them. But if you've got other customers who are much more complicated but do have these experts in-house, then they would quite happily manage their systems themselves. So it really is about having the right combination of solutions to meet your unique requirements as a customer.
Thank you.
And yeah, from a customer point of view, I think that's a brilliant answer. Honestly, we are stuck in a situation whereby we do have basis team, so we have that support, but we also have solutions that we rely very heavily on, primarily to do with the payroll, specifically things like time processing, time evaluation, and the solutions that I've seen so far don't look like they will allow us to. I know lift and shift is a horrible term, to lift and shift what we have into the cloud. So in that respect, customers then have to go, okay, do we really need what we have? Yes, we do. No, we don't. That type of thing. So yeah, it really is down to an individual thing. I appreciate that.
Finding that balance, and I think, well,
Absolutely.
isn't that the answer to all of life, finding that balance in everything that we do?
Yes.
And Adam,
What a way to wrap up.
Adam, you're co-chair of our payroll special interest group, and
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
so obviously an active member of the UKI sub-community. And how has that benefited you and Casey at Deutag?
It's only been recently that I came onto the role, so I undoubtedly haven't got the full benefits yet. I expect to get much more benefit both ways when the next Connect comes up in November, from November 27th to 29th. But it already has allowed me to, from a company perspective, it gets our company name out there. Of course it does. I think we recently hosted in August one of the SIGs. And apparently that was very successful. Unfortunately, I was on holiday at the time. But in terms of increasing the brand awareness for our company, I'll be able to speak to more people at the Connect, and people can definitely come back to me as well. From a personal point of view, it'll allow me to, and already has done, to share the experiences that we have on our not inconsequentially large company and quite global fit to other users in the system, which will then allow them to say, oh, KCA Deutag does this. We have a similar type of setup. So I think one of the primary wins from my side is going to be sharing of information and experiences. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah. And I think that, sharing of information, experiences, networking is some of the key, I suppose, values of being involved in the community. If you were talking to an SAP customer that uses payroll, why should they get involved in the payroll community?
I think it's, for me, why I got involved before I became co-chair. It really is knowing that, it's going to sound a bit trite, knowing that you're not alone. In my situation, I was in other companies, I was the only one doing payroll. If the people in the payroll department wanted to do something or wanted to know how to do something, or can we change this, I've got to ask Dr. Google. Other search engines are available. But if you have that community, and the wider that community is, you can actually feel comfortable about, posting up on the forum, for example. I've got this issue. Can you do this? And also feeling empowered to answering an issue. Actually, I do know the answer to that, and sharing your information. So it's really a case of having a collection of SAP experts. And also we have the link into Natasha, directly to yourself, Natasha, as well. We can ask questions even on the forum and through the user groups as well. So we have that wonderful direct connection, rather than SAP just being somebody remotely on the end of a ticket that we might raise through OSS. It's the connection and the direct communication that helps me, I think. Big win.
Thank you. And Natasha, is there anything you'd like to add from SAP perspective with regards to resources available to customers?
I would definitely promote the user group as a great resource. It's something that whenever I'm talking to new customers, it's one of the first things I'm sort of suggesting they join the community. It's completely independent, but the wealth of knowledge within that group is immense. But in addition to that, the kind of resources that SAP provide, there's the support portal, which absolutely should be everyone's go-to. It has everything on there. But as a UK group within SAP, we have our Jam site where we push information. We can't have a collaboration forum on there, unlike the user group, but we do try and push information out. And yesterday I had the task of putting through a new news flash to provide information to customers how they could accommodate the bank holiday that's scheduled for Monday. So it's a great way of getting that communication and sharing legal updates with customers. We also try and publish knowledge-based articles, so KBAs, and there is actually one that is targeted at how to keep your payroll system up to date, giving customers information about what they should do, what they need to look at, and also going back to the user group again. Adam and I did like a tag team presentation either earlier this year or last year on this very topic of keeping your system up to date, so there's presentations available for that as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And just reflecting back now as we come towards the end of our discussion, we've already mentioned make sure your system's up to date, make sure you're regularly putting the patches in and keeping up to date with everything. Is there anything that perhaps we haven't touched on? Any tips just to leave our listeners with to top off what we've discussed so far? Adam, anything from you?
I think we've probably touched on most of it. For me, it's really a case of try not to leave. It's a combination of trying not to leave your system until you patch the next time. Always look out for updates. And to that point, for the UK and Ireland, one of the most useful things that we have, thank you very much for this, Natasha, is the weekly updates we have for the UK and Ireland. These are the notes that were released last week, and for users to not dismiss these updates. There's also the apps, the announcement of legal changes. It may seem like, okay, I don't want to go in this, I don't want to favorite that, I don't want to do this, but it takes 2 seconds to sign up for it. It's an email that comes in. And then the only other thing that I do as a tip is you can, with an OSS note, if the users have access to that, you can actually favorite an individual OSS note so that every time that note gets updated, or set a favorite search by keyword. So I have a note for stack upgrades, for example, and every time that note is updated each year, I get an update. So I know what stack level I have to be on. I've got searches in for T4, which is like the Canada equivalent of a P60. And it's just a wildcard search. And then I get emails automatic from SAP that says a new note to do with your keyword search has appeared. And I can automatically look at that. So it's just a case of trying to keep up to date in between your patches and not leave it, is all I would say. Communication both ways, really.
Yeah, and Adam's been reading my notes, so because that was all the stuff I had down as well.
Sorry, Natasha.
No, it's fine. And it's good that you've picked up these messages from what we've been talking about. And I'd echo, it's be proactive. The tools are there to help you, so please do actually use them.
Okay, well, thank you, Natasha, Adam. Thank you both very much for your time, your insight, and the help you provide our listeners through that discussion. And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Please make sure you do hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And also, we've linked our previous episode on payroll and HR in the description of this episode for those of you who might not have heard it yet. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep washing your hands.